In a blinding snowstorm, a billionaire almost closes his car door on a freezing child, asking for 1 minute of warmth. 4 quiet words from her mother stop him cold and force a choice that will cost him everything: disappear again, or tell the truth and stay. The storm didn't arrive loudly. It erased things. Snow moved sideways through downtown Chicago, blurring streetlights into pale ghosts and swallowing sidewalks whole. Cars crawled like insects trapped in glass. The city felt smaller, quieter, like it was holding its breath. Rowan Slate, 37, stepped out of the tower that carried his name. Warmth followed him for half a second, then vanished. His black coat was tailored for meetings, not mercy. Wealth had taught him how to stay insulated from cold, from hunger, from people who needed too much. The car waited at the curb, engine humming softly. Mason Dre, his head of security, scanned the street with calm efficiency. No urgency, no fear, just habit. Across the road, near a closed cafe buried in snow, a small figure moved against the wind. She was little, too little to be out alone. A girl in a faded green coat hood pulled tight boots soaked dark at the edges. Snow clung to her lashes, melting slowly, like the storm was taking its time with her. Rowan noticed her the way powerful men often notice suffering, briefly from a distance, already deciding it was not his responsibility. He turned toward the car. The door opened. Warm leather. Silence. Escape. Then a sound. Not a shout, not a cry, a knock. Soft, careful, as if the hand making it wasn't sure it was allowed. Rowan froze. The knock came again, small knuckles against thick glass, persistent but polite. Mason turned. Sir Rowan didn't answer. He looked back through the tinted window. The girl stood there, snow frosting her hair, eyes wide and tired in a way children's eyes shouldn't be. She wasn't begging. She wasn't crying. She was simply asking not to disappear. Rowan lowered the window an inch. Cold rushed in, instantly sharp and unforgiving. The girl stepped closer, careful not to touch the car. She didn't press her face to the glass. She kept her hands folded in front of her like she was waiting her turn. "Please," she said quietly. Then after a pause, warm. Her voice shook, not from drama but from effort. Mason stepped forward at once, his tone gentle and practiced. "Hey, sweetheart, it's dangerous weather. Where's your grown-up?" The girl shook her head. Snow slid from her hood. "I don't have one," she said. Rowan felt something tighten in his chest. Not pity, something older. Something he usually ignored. "You shouldn't be out here," Mason said kindly. "We can call someone to help you." The girl nodded but didn't move away. She looked past Mason, straight at Rowan, like she knew he was the real door. "Just 1 minute," she said. "The cold makes my thoughts go quiet." Rowan inhaled sharply. That wasn't a line. That wasn't rehearsed. That was a child explaining survival the only way she knew how. Behind the wheel, the driver, Omar Khoury, remained still. Perfect posture, hands steady. Rowan hesitated. Liability. Protocol, 100 reasons lined up easily. But the storm pushed harder. The girl swayed slightly on her feet, catching herself before she fell. Rowan opened the door. "Get in," he said, voice low. The girl blinked, surprised, not relieved, not grateful. "Just careful." She climbed into the back seat and folded into the warmth like she'd practiced being small. Rowan handed her his gloves. She hesitated, then slipped her frozen fingers inside. "What's your name?" he asked. She looked down. "Poppy." The door closed. The storm howled outside, and for the first time that night, Rowan Slate did not feel untouched. Heat filled the car. Poppy curled inward, shoulders trembling as her body remembered what warmth felt like. She didn't cry. She just breathed slow, careful breaths, like she was afraid to waste them. Rowan watched her from inches away, unsure where to put his hands, his eyes, his guilt. Mason glanced back, reassured but alert. "We'll take you somewhere safe," he said. "Public place. Then we call for help." "Okay," Poppy nodded. The car pulled forward. For a moment, there was only the sound of tires on snow and the quiet hum of the heater. Rowan tried to speak again, but something stopped him. Poppy's gaze snapped to the front seat. Her expression changed, not fear of the storm, but recognition of a sound. Omar murmured into his phone voice, low measured in a language Rowan didn't understand. Poppy did. Not the words. The tone. Her small hand lifted, tapping the glass harder than before. Not frantic. Urgent. "Sir," she said, eyes locked on Rowan. "Don't." Rowan frowned. "Don't what?" She swallowed. "He's whispering the way my mom warned me about." Rowan's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "My mom said," Poppy continued carefully, "when people whisper like that, someone gets used." Silence filled the car. Rowan met the driver's eyes in the mirror. Omar smiled politely. Too politely. Mason shifted almost imperceptibly. "Training, waking up." Rowan leaned closer to Poppy. "What else did you hear?" Poppy shook her head. "Nothing, just wrong." Rowan straightened. Against instinct, against comfort, against habit. "Change route," he said calmly. "We're going to a public warming hub." "Yes, Mr. Slate," Omar replied smoothly. The car turned. Poppy's hand hovered near the door, not ready to run, but ready to hope. And Rowan realized something unsettling and true. This night wasn't about saving a child from the cold. It was about whether he would listen or stay silent again. Warm air wrapped around Poppy like a memory she hadn't visited in a long time. Her shoulders loosened just a little. Not relief, permission to breathe. Rowan noticed how carefully she sat. Back straight. Hands folded, as if taking up space required approval. He offered a bottle of water from the console. She accepted with both hands and took one small sip, then another. Slow, measured. Mason watched quietly. Not suspicious, protective. Outside, the storm thickened snow, blurring the city into a white tunnel. Inside, the car felt unreal, leather, soft lights, silence that didn't demand anything. Rowan tried again. "Where were you going tonight, Poppy?" She shrugged, eyes on the floor. "Somewhere warm. I was counting doors." "Counting doors?" Rowan asked. "The ones with lights on," she said. "Mom said lights mean people." Rowan swallowed. Mason turned slightly. "Your mom sounds smart." Poppy nodded. She was. The word was landed gently and stayed. Rowan leaned back, staring at the roof. Serena Lane's face floated up from a place he'd locked years ago. Late nights, hushed meetings, promises postponed until they turned into silence. The car slowed briefly at a light. Red washed across Poppy's face. She flinched, not in fear, but reflex. Rowan noticed. "You okay?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Red means stop. I like stop." Rowan managed a small smile. "Me too." From the front, Omar's voice drifted back, polite and smooth. "Traffic is getting worse. I'll take a quieter route." Mason's jaw tightened almost invisibly. He didn't object yet. Rowan felt it again, that pull between ease and responsibility. He looked at Poppy. She was warmer now, color returning to her cheeks. Alive. Present. He thought of how close he'd come to closing the door, and how easy it would have been not to notice. Poppy reached into her coat and pulled out the photograph again, smoothing its creased edges with her thumb. "My mom," she said softly, offering it to Rowan without looking up. Rowan took it carefully. Serena Lane smiled from the picture, tired, kind, determined. The woman he had promised to protect. The promise he had buried under schedules and caution. "What was she like?" Rowan asked. Poppy considered the question seriously. She listened, even when she was scared. Rowan nodded, throat tight. "She told me," Poppy continued, "that if something felt wrong, I should trust quiet feelings more than loud ones." Rowan glanced toward the front seat. Omar's hands stayed steady, too steady. Mason spoke calmly. "We're almost at the warming hub. Lots of people, lights, cameras." Poppy relaxed a fraction. The car slowed, then rolled forward again. Poppy's eyes flicked to the window. "We passed it." Rowan leaned forward. What the building with the blue sign, she said. We passed it. Mason checked the navigation screen. She's right. Rowan's voice stayed even. Omar responded pleasantly. Temporary closure. I'm taking us to another site. Rowan didn't argue. He simply watched. Poppy leaned closer to him, lowering her voice. Sir, yes. My mom said if I ever met you, she whispered I should give you something. She slipped a thin string from beneath her collar. At the end of it hung a small USB. Rowan stared at it. What is it? He asked. She said it's the truth, Poppy replied, and that it's heavy. Rowan took the drive. It felt impossibly light and unbearably full. At that moment, Rowan understood this was not a coincidence. This night had been waiting for him. Rowan straightened, decision settling into his bones. Mason, he said calmly, call it in. We're going to the nearest staffed public hub. Now. Mason nodded and tapped his earpiece voice, low and professional. No panic. No raised tone. Omar hesitated just a second too long, then smiled again. Of course, Mr. Slate. The car turned sharply. Poppy noticed. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her coat, but she didn't pull away. She watched Rowan's face instead, searching for something. Rowan met her eyes and nodded once. You're safe, he said. Not dramatic, not loud, just certain. The car slowed as bright lights came into view, an emergency warming center attached to a transit concourse. Uniformed staff moved behind glass doors. People, warmth, rules. Mason stepped out first, raising a hand to staff. Calm explanations. Clear authority. Rowan opened the door for Poppy himself. The cold rushed in, but it didn't own the moment. Poppy stepped out carefully. A volunteer approached immediately, offering a blanket and a smile. No questions yet. Just care. Rowan stayed close, not hovering, not distant. Omar remained in the driver's seat, engine idling. His eyes met Rowan's in the mirror, no anger now. Just calculation. Rowan turned away. Inside the hub, Poppy sat at a small table with Coco warming her hands. A child advocate knelt nearby, speaking softly. Rowan watched from a respectful distance, the USB drive heavy in his pocket. For the first time in years, he didn't think about stock prices or damage control. He thought about showing up. Poppy glanced back at him and raised her cup slightly, like a quiet signal. Not gratitude, not forgiveness, acknowledgement. And Rowan understood something that scared him more than the storm ever could. Listening tonight had already changed everything. There would be no going back to silence. The warming hub hummed with quiet order. Paper cups, soft voices, volunteers moving with purpose. Rowan sat across from Detective Naomi Klein, the USB drive placed gently on the table between them, like something fragile and alive. Mason stood nearby, arms relaxed but alert. Everyone kept their voices low. Before we open this, Naomi said calmly, I need to be clear. If this contains evidence, it follows procedure, no shortcuts, especially with a child involved. Rowan nodded. That's what I want. Across the room, Poppy sat wrapped in a gray blanket, Coco steaming in her hands. A child advocate sat beside her, letting silence do its work. Poppy watched Rowan, not anxiously, not hopefully, just watching. Naomi inserted the USB into a secured laptop. A single file appeared. Serena_Lane_final. The screen flickered. Serena appeared older than in the photo, thinner but steady. Her eyes met the camera as if she already knew who would be watching. If you're seeing this, she said, voice calm but tired, then my daughter found you. That means I was right to be afraid of silence. Rowan's chest tightened. I'm not recording this to be brave, Serena continued. I'm recording it because truth needs a place to land. She spoke carefully, about translations altered, reports softened, warnings ignored because they were inconvenient. No shouting, no accusations, just facts laid out with patience. Then she named names. Not Rowan, but people around him, systems he benefited from. Silence he allowed. I asked Rowan Slate to help, Serena said. He didn't say no. He just didn't say yes in time. Rowan closed his eyes. Naomi glanced at him. Not judgment, just gravity. Serena's final words were quiet. If you're watching this, Rowan, do better than I did. Don't protect comfort. Protect what's small. The video ended. In the quiet that followed, Rowan realized something irreversible had happened. The truth had landed. The room stayed still after the screen went dark. Naomi exhaled slowly. This is significant, she said. We'll need to verify, corroborate, and secure everything. Rowan nodded. Whatever it takes. His phone vibrated on the table. Once, then again. Naomi glanced at the screen. You can answer on speaker. Rowan hesitated, then tapped accept. A smooth voice filled the room. Familiar. Comfortable. Rowan, the voice said warmly. I heard you had an interesting evening. Rowan didn't respond. The man continued. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. That drive belongs in private hands. We can take care of the child. Quietly. Properly. Across the room, Poppy's head lifted. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Rowan's jaw tightened. There's nothing quiet about the truth. A soft chuckle. Truth is flexible when people are scared. Naomi leaned forward slightly. Sir, this call is being documented. The voice paused. Ah, of course. Then gentler. Rowan, you've worked too hard to lose everything over old paperwork. Think about what's best for everyone. Rowan looked at Poppy. She met his eyes. She didn't nod. She didn't shake her head. She simply waited. Rowan spoke clearly. What's best is following the law. Silence. Then the voice cooled. You're choosing a difficult path? Yes, Rowan replied. I am. The line disconnected. Naomi closed the laptop carefully. That was an attempt to influence. Thank you for not engaging. Rowan leaned back, hands trembling, not with fear, but with release. Poppy walked over slowly, blanket trailing behind her. My mom used to say she murmured easy ways usually go somewhere bad. Rowan managed a small, sad smile. She was right. Poppy studied his face, then asked the question that mattered most. You won't be quiet now, will you? Rowan shook his head. No, I won't. Morning crept in slowly, pale light slipping through the tall windows of the concourse. The storm hadn't stopped, but it had softened like it was listening now. Naomi stood with her phone in hand. We're ready to proceed, she said. If you're willing. Rowan looked around the hub, volunteers, responders, ordinary people warming their hands. Then he looked at Poppy. She stood beside Mason holding her mother's photograph against her chest. Rowan nodded. I'm ready. They moved to a quiet open area where officers documented statements. Body cameras were on, not for drama, but for accuracy. Rowan spoke slowly, carefully. My name is Rowan Slate, he began. I'm the CEO of Slate Meridian Group. And for years, I allowed silence to protect systems that harmed people. He didn't dramatize it. He didn't rush. I was warned. I hesitated. And someone paid the price for my comfort. Poppy watched him. Her fingers tightened around the photo, but she didn't look away. Naomi asked clear, grounded questions. Rowan answered all of them. When he finished, the room felt lighter, not resolved, but honest. Poppy stepped closer. She didn't hug him. She didn't smile. She asked softly, Is that what telling the truth feels like? Rowan considered. It feels like standing in the cold and not running back inside. Poppy nodded. My mom would like that. A social worker approached, speaking gently about contacting Poppy's grandmother. Poppy listened, then looked back at Rowan. You're still here, she said. Yes, Rowan replied. I am. Not as a hero, Not as a savior, just as a grown-up who finally understood that staying, even when it's uncomfortable, is how trust begins. And for the first time since the storm started, Poppy believed the night might end somewhere safe. By mid-morning, the storm became background noise. Phones did not. Rowan's name began to move quietly at first, then faster. Messages stacked. Board members, advisors, people who had once praised his caution now begged him to reconsider it. Detective Naomi Klein didn't interrupt. She let the reality arrive on its own. "This will go public," she said evenly. "Not all at once. But it will go." Rowan nodded. "I won't stop it." Across the hub, Poppy sat with a social worker drawing slow circles on paper. She looked calm. That frightened Rowan more than tears would have. Naomi continued, "There will be pressure to frame this as misunderstanding, to reduce harm to whom?" Rowan asked. Naomi met his eyes. "That depends on what you choose next." Rowan thought of Serena's video, of the word later, of how easily good intentions turn into hiding places. "I'll speak," Rowan said. "On record." Naomi paused. "You understand what that means?" "I do." They set up a small press area inside the concourse, neutral, well-lit, controlled. No spectacle, just accountability. Rowan stood behind a simple podium. No logo, no branding. Mason stood off to the side, not as muscle, but as witness. Cameras blinked on. Rowan breathed once, then began. "I'm here because a child asked me for 1 minute of warmth," he said, "and because I stayed long enough to listen." He explained the evidence. He named the failures. He did not excuse himself. "I chose comfort when I should have chosen courage," Rowan said. "That choice helped harm someone who trusted me." Questions followed. Hard ones. Rowan answered without defensiveness. From the edge of the room, Poppy watched. Not with awe, with measurement. When it ended, Rowan stepped away from the podium. The noise rushed in. Calls, shouts, opinions. But one voice mattered. Poppy approached him slowly. "People are loud now," she said. "Yes," Rowan replied. She nodded. "That means you didn't hide." Rowan felt the weight of the day settle, not crushing, but permanent. This was the cost of daylight, and he was paying it willingly. By afternoon, the consequences began to take shape. Rowan's board convened without him. Lawyers spoke in careful phrases. Advisors suggested pauses, leaves, rebranding. Naomi made one thing clear: there will be no private settlements around a child. Ever. Rowan agreed without hesitation. Poppy's grandmother, Joni Lane, arrived just before sunset, small, bundled eyes sharp with worry and love. She pulled Poppy into a careful hug, whispering reassurances that didn't rush. Rowan stood back. He didn't approach. He waited. Joni looked at him, then not grateful, not angry, assessing. "You're the man from the video," she said. "Yes," Rowan replied. "I'm also the man who was too late." Joni held his gaze. "Late doesn't mean gone," she said quietly. "But it doesn't mean forgiven either." "I understand," Rowan said. Arrangements were discussed: temporary placement support services, school continuity. Everything documented, everything transparent. Rowan insisted on one condition: I won't control it. I'll fund support through an independent trust. You choose. Always. Joni nodded once. That's how trust starts. Later, in a quieter corner, Poppy sat beside Rowan on 2 plastic chairs set slightly apart. "Are you scared?" she asked. "Yes," Rowan answered honestly. "Of losing things," she pressed. "Of losing the wrong things," he said. Poppy considered that. "My mom said people lose themselves first." Rowan swallowed. She was right. That evening, Rowan returned to his apartment, not the tower, but a temporary place his team had arranged. Smaller. Quieter. He turned on a lamp and sat without distraction. For the first time, he didn't feel powerful. He felt responsible. His phone buzzed once more. A final message from someone offering a way to soften the fallout. Rowan deleted it without replying. Across town, Poppy fell asleep on a borrowed couch, her grandmother's hand resting lightly on her back. No nightmares, just deep, earned rest. The storm continued outside, but something inside both of them had finally stopped running. The next morning, Rowan returned to the warming hub, not because he had to, but because he said he would. He brought groceries, soup, oranges, a thin book with a cracked spine he remembered from childhood. Poppy looked up when he entered. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. "You came," she said. "Yes," Rowan replied. They sat at the same small table. He didn't crowd her. He didn't fill the silence. After a while, Poppy slid the book toward him. "Can you read? I can." Rowan said, surprised by how much that mattered. He read slowly. His voice wobbled once, then steadied. Poppy colored while listening, occasionally correcting him when he missed a word. It felt ordinary. That was the miracle. A social worker stopped by with updates about school placement and counseling, gentle, age-appropriate, protective. Rowan listened. He took notes. Later, Poppy asked, "Will you go away now that it's quieter?" Rowan didn't promise forever. He promised what was true. "I'll be here tomorrow," he said, "and the day after. Even if you don't want to see me." Poppy studied him, long enough to make adults uncomfortable. Then she nodded. "That's better than promises." Before leaving, she pointed to a chair by the window. "You can sit there next time." Rowan felt something loosen in his chest. Not forgiveness, permission. As he left, Naomi caught up with him. "This will take years," she said. "There will be court dates. Losses," "I know," Rowan replied. "And you're still in yes." Naomi nodded. "Then you're doing it right." Outside, the snow thinned to a soft drift. The city moved on as cities do. Rowan walked instead of taking a car, the cold sharp on his cheeks, reminding him he was alive, present, accountable. Behind him, inside a warm room with light and crayons, a child learned something quiet and powerful: some adults don't disappear. The storm had moved on, but Chicago still looked rinsed in white. Snow clung to corners of buildings like stubborn secrets, the kind that didn't melt just because the sun showed up. Rowan Slate walked into Slate Meridian's headquarters through the side entrance. No cameras, no entourage, no dramatic stride. Just a man who had once owned every room he entered, now stepping carefully, as if the floor might judge him. The conference room was too bright, too clean. The long table gleamed like an instrument. His board sat waiting. They didn't stand. They didn't greet him. Their faces were polite in the way that meant prepared. A legal team sat along the wall like furniture. A PR consultant held a folder thick as winter. Rowan took the chair at the head of the table because it was still his chair technically. For now. The interim chairwoman, a silver-haired woman named Evelyn Marks, spoke first. "Rowan, what you did yesterday, speaking on record, triggered regulatory review. Investor confidence is unstable." Rowan nodded. "I know." "Do you also know," she continued, "that you could have handled this privately? With counsel? With strategy?" Rowan looked down at his hands. He heard Serena Lane's voice in his head. "Truth needs a place to land." He looked up. "I handled it publicly because a child was involved. Because hiding would have been the same mistake twice." A board member sighed, tired rather than angry. "We are not debating morality. We are discussing survival," Rowan said quietly. "Morality is survival, just not for shareholders." The room went still. Evelyn slid a document forward. "We're asking you to step down as CEO effective immediately. You can remain a non-executive director quietly until this stabilizes." Rowan did not flinch. He expected it. He also expected the next part. A new voice joined the room from the far end, smooth, familiar, warm as brandy. "Rowan." Rowan's eyes moved toward the doorway. Brett Hollander, 56, former CFO, walked in like a man returning to his own house. Expensive suit, calm smile. He moved with the confidence of someone who believed rules existed for other people. A few board members relaxed at his presence, not because they loved him, but because they thought he knew how to fix things. Brett placed a thin folder on the table. "I'm here as a concerned stakeholder," he said lightly. "Not to fight, to help." Rowan's jaw tightened. "You're not on the board." "Not anymore," Brett agreed, unbothered. "But I still care about this company. And frankly, Rowan, I care about you." Rowan didn't answer. Brett's gaze slid toward the lawyers. "This situation can be contained. I've drafted a pathway." He opened the folder. A series of steps-controlled statements: limited cooperation, strategic distancing, charitable press, an independent fund with conditions. A plan that sounded responsible until you looked closely and realized it was built on one old idea: keep the truth soft. Keep it slow. Keep it forgettable. Brett leaned in, voice gentle. "We do the right thing, Rowan. We support the child. We support the family. We protect the company. No need to burn the whole house down." Rowan stared at the pages. Then he looked at Brett. "You want me to be quiet again?" Rowan said. Brett smiled. "I want you to be practical." Rowan felt heat climb his throat, not rage, not drama, something heavier: clarity. He stood. Every chair creaked in unison, as if the room had rehearsed discomfort. Rowan pushed the folder back toward Brett. "I'm stepping down," he said, "but not to protect the company, to stop hiding behind it." Evelyn blinked. Rowan lifted a hand. "I will cooperate fully. I will testify. I will provide everything I have, and I will not accept any private agreements tied to a child's safety." Brett's smile tightened for the first time. "You're making an emotional decision." Rowan's voice stayed calm. "No, I'm making a lawful one." He slid his resignation letter across the table. He had written it at 3 a.m. when it became clear sleep was something he hadn't earned. Evelyn's lips parted, surprised by how ready he was. Rowan turned to leave. At the door he paused and looked back one last time at the room that used to feel like power. "I'm done," he said quietly, confusing silence with responsibility. Then he walked out. Outside, snowflakes drifted down like ash from a fire that had already happened. Rowan didn't look up. He thought of Poppy's question. "Will you disappear when it's quiet?" And he promised himself, with no witnesses but his own conscience. Not this time. Family court was nothing like television. No shouting, no drama, no cinematic verdicts slamming down like thunder. Just fluorescent lights, quiet paperwork, and the careful language of adults trying to make the safest choice for a child. Rowan sat on a bench in the hallway with Mason a few seats away. Not looming, not guarding, just present, a respectful distance as instructed. Across the hall, Poppy sat beside her grandmother Joni and a child advocate. Poppy wore a clean sweater, and her familiar green scarf, still her choice, still her armor, but softer now. She held her mother's photograph in her lap like a compass. Rowan didn't wave. He didn't approach. He waited to be invited into the child's world, not to seize it. Detective Naomi Klein appeared with a folder, calm as stone. "Rowan," she said quietly, "you'll be asked questions. Keep your answers factual. Do not make promises you can't legally keep." Rowan nodded. "Understood." The case wasn't about guilt today. It wasn't even about the corporation. It was about where Poppy would sleep, who would decide her school, who could be trusted to show up. Inside the hearing, the judge spoke gently, like someone who understood children were not problems to solve, but people to protect. Joni spoke first. "I'm her grandmother," she said. "I'm older, but I'm not alone. I have community support. I have a safe home. I want my granddaughter with me." Her voice trembled once. Poppy placed a small hand over Joni's knuckles. The gesture was tiny and massive. A social worker spoke about needs therapy resources, school continuity, stability, age-appropriate care. Then Rowan was called to speak. He stood hands open at his sides. No power pose, no speech. The judge asked Mr. Slate, "What is your relationship to the child?" Rowan inhaled. "I am not her family," he said carefully. "I am connected to her mother's case, and I am responsible for failing to act when I should have." The room stayed quiet. Even the lawyers didn't interrupt. The judge asked, "What do you want?" Rowan answered truthfully. "I want her safe. I want her supported, and I want to ensure no one can use resources as control." A lawyer asked sharper, "Are you trying to take custody?" Rowan looked at Poppy, then looked away again, choosing restraint over emotional performance. "No," he said. "I am not asking to be her guardian. I'm asking for permission to support through lawful channels and to remain a consistent, supervised presence if her family approves." Joni's eyes narrowed, not unkindly. "Consistency," she said. "That's what children need." Poppy finally looked at Rowan. Her gaze was steady, measuring. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. Then the hardest question came not from a lawyer, but from the judge, gentle and direct. "Mr. Slate, children often experience adults disappearing. Why should this child trust you to stay?" Rowan's throat tightened. He could have said 100 beautiful lines. Instead, he told the truth. "She shouldn't trust me yet," Rowan said quietly. "Trust has to be earned over time. I can only prove it by showing up repeatedly without asking for anything in return." The judge nodded, as if that was the only answer that made sense. The decision came carefully. Poppy would be placed with her grandmother under supportive services. Rowan's financial assistance would be permitted only through an independent court-approved trust, fully transparent with no influence attached. Any contact would be child-led, supervised if required, and reviewed regularly. Outside the courtroom, Rowan exhaled like he had been holding his breath for years. Joni approached him in the hall, Poppy behind her. Joni spoke softly, so only he could hear. "You don't get to buy your way into a child's heart." Rowan nodded. "I know," Joni added. "But you can earn a seat in her life, if you can do the boring part." Rowan's voice cracked slightly. "I can." Poppy stepped forward, just one step. Not close, not far. "My mom said," she whispered, "grown-ups disappear when the hard part is over." Rowan met her eyes. "Then I'll keep showing up when it's quiet," he said. Poppy studied him, then looked down at her photo. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no. And in that hallway, under plain lights and plain truth, a beginning formed, small, careful, and real. Spring tried to arrive in Chicago like a cautious apology. Snow retreated in patches. Sidewalks reappeared. The city remembered its edges. Rowan's world shrank. No tower, no driver, no boardroom calendar that swallowed days whole. He lived in a modest apartment with a kitchen table that scratched if you dragged a chair too fast. At first, the silence felt like punishment. Then it became something else, space to become honest. Every morning, Rowan walked. He learned streets he had only seen through tinted glass. He learned what cold felt like when you couldn't switch it off. He learned to carry groceries without expecting applause. Once a week, he met with Naomi's office to provide more documents, clarify timelines, cooperate. It wasn't dramatic, just steady. It was the kind of work that doesn't trend online but changes outcomes. And twice a week, when Joni allowed it, when Poppy wanted it, Rowan visited. He never arrived empty-handed in a way that felt like bribery. Sometimes he brought soup, sometimes oranges, sometimes a new pack of crayons, sometimes just himself and a book. The first time he came to Joni's apartment, he stood at the door longer than necessary, as if giving them time to decide he wasn't welcome. Joni opened it. Her eyes checked him the way a lock checks a key. "You're on time," she said. "I said I would be," Rowan replied. Inside, Poppy sat at the small table by the window, sunlight cutting across the paper in front of her. She was drawing a house, simple, careful lines. A door, two windows, a small figure, then another. Rowan didn't comment. He sat where she had once pointed the chair by the window. He didn't fill the room with words. After a few minutes, Poppy slid a thin, worn book toward him. "Read," she said. Rowan opened it. On the inside cover in Serena's handwriting were 3 words, "Don't leave her." Rowan's hands stilled. He didn't show the page to anyone. He didn't make it a moment. He simply began to read, voice low, steadying as he went. Poppy colored while listening. Sometimes she corrected him. Sometimes she let him stumble. That Rowan realized was its own kind of trust, letting someone be imperfect without punishing them for it. After the reading, Poppy asked without looking up, "Did it hurt?" Rowan blinked. "Did what hurt, losing your big building?" she said, tone neutral. Rowan thought about it. Thought about the boardroom's bright table, Brett Hollander's smooth smile, the ease he once wore like armor. "Yes," Rowan admitted. "It hurt." Poppy nodded like that made sense. "My mom said losing stuff hurts," she murmured. "But losing yourself hurts more." Rowan's throat tightened. She was right. Joni watched them from the kitchen, arms crossed, not cold, cautious. She had seen too many adults mean well and still fail. When Rowan left, he didn't say, "See you soon." He didn't say, "I promise." He said, "I'll be back Tuesday. If that still works for you." Joni nodded. Tuesday. Tuesday came. Rowan returned, then Thursday, then next week. Months passed in a pattern. And patterns are the language children trust. One afternoon, a news alert flashed in a cafe screen: former CEO cooperates in major investigation. Strangers whispered as Rowan walked past, not recognizing him without the tower behind him. He didn't correct them. He didn't explain. He just kept walking. At Joni's apartment, Poppy had started leaving a chair out before he arrived. Not a big gesture. Just a chair. One day after a long silence, Poppy asked, "Are you going away when the court is done?" Rowan didn't rush to soothe her. He answered the way Naomi taught him to answer, truthful, grounded. "I can't control everything," Rowan said, "but I can control showing up when I'm allowed to, and I'll keep doing that." Poppy stared at him for a long time, as if listening for a lie under the words. Finally, she said something small. "Okay. Not forgiveness, not family, just a doorway opening 1 inch." Rowan felt the sting behind his eyes and looked down, blinking it away. Not because tears were shameful, but because he didn't want Poppy to feel responsible for his emotions. Joni noticed anyway. She spoke quietly from the kitchen. "You're learning," she said. Rowan nodded. Outside, spring light warmed the window. Inside, a child sat safely at a table, drawing a house with 2 figures near the door. And a man who used to disappear into power sat in the chair by the window, doing the hardest thing he'd ever done, staying. The courthouse didn't feel cold. It felt quietly hungry, like it ate excuses and left only facts. Rowan arrived early, carrying a single folder and a calm that took effort. Mason walked beside him, not looming, just present. Naomi Klein met them at the security line with a glance that said, "Stay steady." Inside, Rowan sat in a small conference room where a court reporter adjusted her headphones and typed his name at the top of a page. "State your full name," the attorney asked. Rowan did. The deposition began like a slow drip. Contracts, dates, emails, meetings that had seemed harmless until you stacked them in the right order and saw the shape of a decision. Rowan answered everything carefully, not to protect himself, to protect the truth from being dismissed as emotion. Then the door opened. Brett Hollander stepped in, older than his photos, same polished suit, same smile, smooth enough to make people forget they were being guided. He took a seat across from Rowan like they were colleagues again, not consequences. "Rowan," Brett said warmly. Still playing the hero, Rowan didn't respond. He kept his eyes on the attorney. "Continue," he said. Brett chuckled softly. Let's not pretend we don't understand each other. You don't want to burn everything. You just feel guilty. Rowan's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed even. Guilt isn't the reason. Evidence is. Brett's gaze slid toward the court reporter. So formal. So public. He leaned in, lowering his tone in a way meant to sound kind. This could have been private. We could have protected the child without ruining you. Rowan's eyes sharpened. The child doesn't need protection that comes with strings. Brett's smile thinned. You always were sentimental. That's why I had to be practical. Rowan felt the old trap trying to spring Brett, framing control as care, silence as stability. Naomi spoke calmly from the corner. Mr. Hollander, this is a legal proceeding. Keep your statements factual. Brett lifted his hands slightly. Of course. The attorney asked Rowan, did you ever instruct Mr. Hollander to handle witnesses? Rowan inhaled. He could answer in a way that kept him safe. He could answer in a way that kept the company safe. He could answer in a way that kept the past buried and the present calm. Then he saw Poppy's drawing in his mind a door and two windows, a house built with simple lines, a child's need for something that didn't disappear. Rowan said clearly, I didn't give explicit orders. I gave something worse permission through silence, and I knew what that silence allowed. Brett's smile finally broke. Not anger, something sharper. Fear. Rowan held his gaze without blinking. Because this time the truth wasn't a performance. It was a door Rowan refused to close again. The hearing wasn't loud. It was heavy. Rowan sat at a plain table, no corporate logo, no entourage. Just his attorney, Naomi's team, and a courtroom that smelled faintly of paper and old varnish. In the gallery, Poppy sat with Grandma Jo and a child advocate. Her feet didn't touch the floor. She held Serena's photograph against her sweater like a small shield that didn't hurt anyone. Rowan didn't turn around to look at her too much. He didn't want her to feel responsible for his courage. The prosecutor spoke in clean sentences. The pattern of concealment, the paper trail, the way money moved like water around truth, eroding it slowly. Then the judge asked Rowan to stand. Mr. Slate, the judge said, voice measured. You understand the gravity of your testimony and the consequences of your admissions. Yes, Rowan replied. The questions came. Rowan answered without decoration. Did you benefit from these systems? Yes. Did you fail to act when you had the power to stop harm? Yes. A murmur moved through the room. Not outrage, recognition. People hearing the word yes from someone used to saying it's complicated. Rowan spoke of Serena Lane without turning her into a symbol. He spoke of her as a person who trusted him and how his hesitation had become a kind of betrayal. In the opposing seats, Brett Hollander watched, jaw-tight eyes calculating. He whispered to his counsel, trying to reframe, redirect, soften. But truth doesn't soften once it's said out loud. At one point, the judge asked Rowan, why now? Rowan paused. He could have given a rehearsed answer about integrity, about leadership, about redemption. Instead, he looked briefly toward the gallery, just a fraction of a second enough to acknowledge Poppy without putting her on display. Because a child asked me for 1 minute of warmth, Rowan said, and I realized I'd been warm my whole life while other people froze alone. Poppy's eyes lifted. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She simply watched him carefully, like measuring if a bridge would hold. The judge nodded slowly. The court recognizes the value of cooperation, she said. It also recognizes that accountability must be real. Rowan sat back down. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of not hiding. When the hearing recessed, Naomi approached him in the hallway. You did well, she said. Rowan exhaled. It doesn't feel like winning. Naomi's expression softened. It isn't winning. It's choosing not to run. Across the hall, Poppy tugged Grandma Jo's sleeve and whispered, he didn't disappear. Grandma Jo squeezed her hand. Not today. And for Poppy, not today was a beginning. That evening, the storm returned as flurries, gentle, almost polite. Chicago's streets glowed under street lamps, snow sparkling like the city was trying to look innocent. Rowan sat alone on a bench in a small park. No cameras, no advisors, no board, just winter air and a paper cup of coffee that cooled too fast. He heard footsteps behind him and didn't turn right away, thinking it might be a stranger. Then a small voice said, "Hi." Rowan looked up. Poppy stood there with Grandma Joe's scarf wrapped tight, cheeks pink from cold. The child advocate lingered at a respectful distance. Everything was appropriate. Everything was safe. Rowan stood, then stopped himself, too quick, too eager. He sat back down slowly, giving Poppy space to choose. Poppy approached one step at a time. "Court is loud," she said. Rowan nodded. "It is." Poppy stared at the snow by his shoes, then asked the question she'd been carrying like a stone. "Are you going to get punished?" Rowan swallowed. "Maybe," he said. "Some consequences are fair." Poppy considered that carefully, like she was learning how the world worked. Is fair. Safe. Rowan's throat tightened. "Fair can be safe," he said. "Because it means rules are real. It means people can't just do anything." Poppy's fingers pinched the edge of her glove. "My mom said rules are only real when rich people follow them." Rowan let the sentence land. He didn't defend himself. He didn't argue. He simply said, "Then I'll follow them." Grandma Joe watched him for a long moment, then spoke quietly. "You don't get to ask her for forgiveness." Rowan nodded. "I won't." Poppy's voice came out soft but clear. "Mom wanted you to say sorry." Rowan's eyes stung. "I am sorry," he said. "For being late. For being quiet. For letting you carry her truth by yourself." Poppy looked up at him, eyes steady. "She also wanted you to tell the truth." "I did," Rowan said. Poppy nodded slowly. "She didn't say I have to forgive you." Rowan exhaled almost a laugh that broke into breath. "You don't." They sat in a silence that wasn't empty. It was full of boundaries and beginnings. After a long moment, Poppy patted the bench one small tap. "You can sit here," she said. Rowan moved an inch closer, not touching, not taking, just sharing space. Snow drifted down soft as a promise that didn't need words. And for the first time, Rowan understood redemption isn't a door you walk through. It's a bench someone lets you share one honest day at a time. The decision arrived without drama. No gasps, no slammed gavel. Just the judge's voice, steady and precise, reading consequences that would change a life in increments, not explosions. Rowan Slate stood and listened. He was ordered to full cooperation restitution, through verified channels, long-term oversight, and a sentence that carried weight without spectacle. No special treatment, no shortcuts disguised as mercy. Rowan nodded once. "I understand." Outside the courthouse, snow drifted again, light this time, almost thoughtful. Reporters called his name. He didn't answer. Across the steps, Poppy stood between Grandma Joe and a court advocate. Her feet swung just above the stone. She watched Rowan, not with fear, not with pride, with attention. Rowan approached, slowly stopping a respectful distance away. "Is it over?" Poppy asked. Rowan shook his head. "No, it's starting." She considered that. "Mom said starting again is harder than saying sorry." Rowan smiled faintly. She was right. Grandma Joe spoke quietly. "We'll keep the visits, as long as Poppy wants them." Rowan nodded. "Thank you." Poppy looked up at him. "You didn't try to leave." "No," Rowan said. "I won't." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure. But it was something sturdier. Rules had spoken. Consequences had landed, and a child had watched an adult accept them without running. That mattered more than headlines. Time did what it always does when no one rushes it. It built trust out of repetition. Rowan's life became smaller and clearer. Court dates, required service, long walks, evenings that ended early because there was nothing left to prove. Once a month, sometimes more, he visited Poppy with Grandma Joe's permission, always supervised when needed, always on Poppy's terms. They didn't talk about the case unless Poppy asked. They talked about school, about a bird that nested near Joe's window and screamed like it owned the city, about books Rowan learned to read better because Poppy corrected him without mercy. He never brought gifts that felt heavy, mostly groceries, sometimes pencils, sometimes just time. Poppy didn't call him anything. Not uncle, not dad, not friend, but she started saving him a chair. One afternoon she asked, "Are you cold there sometimes?" Rowan nodded. Yes, she thought for a moment. Snow makes things quiet. Yes, he said again. It does. Rowan wrote letters he didn't send to apologize. He wrote them to tell the truth about ordinary days, about listening, about waiting. And Poppy grew slowly, safely. The world stopped shaking long enough for her to breathe. Routine became the language they shared, and routine, Rowan learned, was love without performance. Years later, winter returned, gentle, honest. Rowan sat on a bench in a small park, hands wrapped around a paper cup. No coat he couldn't afford to lose. No place he needed to be afterward. Footsteps crunched behind him. Poppy stood there taller now, scarf wrapped the way she chose. Grandma Joe waited a few steps back. Rowan stood, then stopped himself. He waited. Poppy walked closer and held up her mother's photograph, edges, soft corners worn. "I keep this," she said, "so I don't forget who she was." Rowan nodded. She mattered. Poppy met his eyes. "And I keep you, so I don't forget who told the truth." Rowan's breath caught. He didn't speak. Poppy stepped forward and hugged him. Not tight, not long, just enough. "I don't forgive you," she said gently. Rowan nodded. "You don't have to." "But you didn't disappear," Poppy added. "No," Rowan said. "I stayed." She pulled back and smiled, not big, not dramatic. "Real." "Come on," she said. "We're late." For what, Rowan asked. For living. They walked side by side as snow began to fall again, soft this time, almost kind. Not redeemed, not erased. Just honest enough to keep going. Did this story leave a lasting impression on you? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment, rate it from 1 to 10, and tap the end screen to see another heartwarming story waiting for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, then tap the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. Until our next story.